Ooh.
Live.
Broadcast is live.
We're all here.
All here. Hello, everyone out there in all the internet.
Oh,
Hello. My name is Chanel Aponte Pearson, and I am a proud member of the new Negress Film Society. And I
Oh,
have,
I'm Stephanie Santonge, also a member of New Negress Film Society, also a filmmaker.
right. And I'm Yvonne Michelle Shirley, also a member of New Negress Film Society and a filmmaker as well.
and we are a creative collective centering the voices of Black women and non-binary filmmakers. The programming we offer, the conversations that we facilitate, and the films that we produce are all rooted in a legacy of collective art making, institution building, and consciousness raising, all grounded in the personal and political realities of Black people everywhere. Welcome to our second annual Black Women's Film Conference. We are incredibly grateful for those partners that helped make this all possible. Warner Media, Ford Foundation, POV, and literally each and every supporter that has been by us, over the years. We are incredibly grateful for you making this all happen.
See, too many tabs up still. All right. So for our first conversation, so we're proud to be here, as Chanel said, and this is our opening conversation, and we're very honored to have with us illustrious filmmaker Zeinabu Irene Davis. Zeinabu has just blessed us with her presence tonight when we have so much on our minds that we want to discuss with her. For this year's conference, she's sharing with us her film Spirits of Rebellion, which I think is what you completed in 2016. Was that?
Yes.
2016. She is a very accomplished filmmaker, member of the iconic LA Rebellion, which we'll get into. She's a professor and mentor, and just a wonderful human being. And we're so happy to have her. Thank you for being here with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess first, this is a conversation about collectivity. We are a collective, and then you seem to have studied. Not only were you a part of collectives, you also have studied many collectives. But taking it back further, I guess we can all share our origin stories, what even got us into filmmaking. If you want to start, Zeinabu, and then we can all go around.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna make it's kind of a long story and circuitous, so I think I'll just try to be as short to the chase as possible. I'm from Philly, even though I now live in San Diego, and I've lived in California longer than I lived on the East Coast now. But my mom and dad were working class parents. My mom is from Montreal, Canada, and my dad is from Greenwood, South Carolina. And they gave me a love of the arts from a very early age. I have very fond memories of my dad taking me to theater, and me, my dad, and my brother, and I all going to the movies together as a family, and basically spending the entire afternoon at the movies. So the love of the expression of Black people on a screen and in the theater was instilled in me really early on. And I was fortunate enough to go to Brown University. And I went to Brown with the intention of becoming a lawyer, but I failed Econ 101, was a prerequisite for doing international relations. And then that was it. I was an A student before that. And I was like, no, I can't be failing classes. So I switched. And I never had Black teachers when I was coming up in the K through 12 system. I went to Catholic schools. So when I did get to college, I was very lucky. I met a number of Black male professors who were extremely kind and very open and very giving. There's people like Michael Harper, who's a poet, Anani Degenio, who's a Ghanaian scholar of Brazil, um, Red Jones, historian, George Bass, theater professor, Brother Ah, who's a musician and drummer. So all these people kind of like instilled in me, again, more of the love of arts. And I was lucky enough to spend my junior year in Kenya, East Africa. But first, I because I didn't pass the econ class, I found an ad on the board at school which was advertising for interns for public TV. And I happened to reply to that response for internship, and I was lucky enough to be interning with another Black woman by the name of Jenny Booth. And she had a public affairs program called Shades. So when I started out, I actually thought I wanted to be kind of more like a host, like Jenny was, or like, you know, what you guys would know more, be familiar with, would be like Oprah. But then I kind of learned that the power wasn't in being in front of the camera, it was actually in being behind the camera, because you're the one who called the shots. You're the one who actually said what could be, what the show's program would be about. And so through studying with Jenny and being at a small public television station, I was able to learn a lot of skills like photography and learning to work with audience members for panel discussions and doing all kinds of like organizing work that we could do to bring people into the audiences and thing there. So when I got to Kenya, I had all these skills. And I was very fortunate to work with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who's a famous Kenyan writer. And when I was working with Ngugi, he was putting on a play. And it was a play that was talking about the Kenyan resistance against the British colonialization. That movement was called the Mau Mau movement. But the play was featuring the stories of the elders who were still alive in the community, actors who would be on the stage acting out what the elders were talking about. And then my job was to put the historical photographs behind the stage on the screen so that people could see what was going on, or what other people basically had captured that was what was supposed to be going on. And unfortunately, 3 days after we cleared a field, a big soccer field, put in the stage by hand, put in seats by hand, the government said that the play was seditious and closed it down. And the University of Nairobi was closed. The play was over, and Ngugi had to go back into hiding.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was it. So that experience taught me that you had to be responsible for the images that you were going to project of your people. And those images could indeed be very powerful. And while we were working up towards the play, we would see these like European filmmakers coming from, you know, Germany or the UK. And they were always filming in Kenya, but they were never filming the people that were in Kenya. They were filming the wildlife. And Kenya is an extremely beautiful country that has so many different ethnic groups that it always was just like really annoying to think that their stories were not being told. It was the animals were more important than the people. And so when I came back to the States after studying abroad, it was like really put into me that I had to study film. And basically that's how I got to UCLA for film school.
How you go back to, you know, when in thinking about our origin stories, our filmmaking origin stories, bringing it back to childhood, right? Because I think, you know, being in this in this field professionally, I always go back to my origin story as to like, this was the first time that I, produced a film, which was in like 2012. But it's interesting because it was actually my mother that reminded me. She's like, you know what, when we were little, whenever we would go to like family reunions or whenever we would all get together for birthdays, you always wanted to grab the camcorder and you were the one that was running around, capturing other people. I never wanted to be in front of the camera, but I loved, shooting everyone else in the family. And then I'm so glad you also talked about just like our experiences going to the movies. That was also a tradition in my family. We grew up working class, but every Sunday or every other Sunday, it was our thing to go to the theater. It was walking distance, Whitestone Cinema in the Bronx, and we would go as a family to watch films. And so I keep thinking about just even really what started that connection, and it also makes me think about I grew up with my older sister and two of my older cousins, and what we thought was the most entertaining thing ever was to recreate music videos. So like this whole music, like this one really good one of like us recreating Ladies' Night, with like Missy Elliott and just like I was like the tomboyish one. It's just like not about Left Side. And so, like we really created each and every scene and we took it very seriously. Like I had my one cousin like on the bed with like one of my tennis rackets acting like she was on a jet ski. And my other cousin like spraying water off the side, spraying. Even at that time, again, like we did it. I never thought of filmmaking as a career, as a profession. It just never ever dawned on me that was something that was a career path that I can enter into. It was something that we know that was something that we consumed, that we enjoyed for entertainment purposes, but it wasn't until much later that I actually, when I was surrounded by people.
I think Chanel lost you for a second, or I did. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. And that I realized that, this is something that I can enter. And also just realizing I feel like in another life, I was a policy, I was a policy researcher. I went to school for public administration and nonprofit management. And after a while, I got tired of writing policy memos. There was some aspects of that policy making that I wasn't really interested in. If anything, I was more interested in participatory research, community-based research.
Mm-hmm.
But in the way that we provided that research to the communities that I felt like needed that information and leveraged that to make the change that we need to change, for me, I always saw the power of film and the moving image. And even in grad school, I put on this film festival, trying to raise awareness about human trafficking. And so there was always something about the power of the medium that that has just always stayed with me, and really trying to look at that or find that intersection between, between art and social justice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's kind of been my journey. But I always go back to the very first, aspects of how it all started. And for me, that was with family, going to the movies and capturing and documenting my own family and everything together.
Yeah. I think for me, too, it's interesting how we all can come from different places to this place. I was studying to be a doctor, and similar to what you were saying, Zeinabu, I started getting D's and F's, and I said, "There's no way this is for me if I can't get past these math, these science classes. Like, this cannot be for me." But I luckily I was majoring in sociology, and I was also double majoring in African American studies, and it just so happened that one semester where I was sad and lost and not knowing what to do, Louis Messiah was an artist in residence with in the African American Studies department, and he was teaching a class. I can't remember what it was called, but he was sharing with us filmmakers that I had never been exposed to ever. I remember he brought Camille Billups to class. He brought, we watched her films. We went out to dinner with her. I was like, who is this woman? This is, what is this? But it was amazing. And we also, he brought Manchia Diawara, I think, to the class also. We watched Lumumba. We watched so many great films. We watched, Marlon Riggs films. And basically we watched, of course, Louis' films, Du Bois and Four Voices and Bombing of Osage. And basically, I realized that filmmaking, as much as I did appreciate film, that it could really be something of service in a way that I definitely had not been exposed to it before, or even had imagined that it could be that. And so, I think that's really, for me, it's really central. It's interesting because then I went to film school and almost forgot just what I had been drawn to from that undergraduate class. And now I feel like I'm in the process of unlearning still a lot of what happened in my graduate program and trying to get back to what Louis was trying to teach us and the folks that he was bringing to our attention, and also just the ways, the methods of doing community-centered film work. And he had built an institution, Scribe Video Center in Philadelphia. So for me, it was really tied to activism, and I think that it's something that's coming up more and more and more for me right now in terms of just thinking through these times about what I want my practice to be and how I want it to affect my community.
Yeah, I guess I have very similar stories to everyone. It's true. Like, same thing. My family was like all into cinema, and still to this day, like that's like our main bonding activity is like talking about movies, going to the movies. And I grew up in Florida, well, in New York and Florida, but in Florida, I went to University of Florida, and it's just like there's no arts program really there. And so I studied journalism, and the whole idea, like for me, going into journalism was always like political. I just wanted to like make change through writing. And just like everyone else, I had a professor, Dr. Nunn, who actually recently passed, unfortunately, but she had this like Black cinema studies class that, introduced me and everyone to all these Black films like Lumumba as well, like Sankofa, Daughters of the Dust. But even then, it still didn't click to me like being a filmmaker until I actually met a filmmaker. When I had taken another course, which was random. It was a journalism course, and the professor just asked one of his friends to come and show their film. And it was a good film. It was a good documentary film. And that's when I thought, oh, you can make documentary films and do the same thing that like journalism, or what I intended for journalism, like tell stories about real people and like somehow affect audiences in that way. But it really wasn't until Farron, who's also participating in the conference, like she moved in with me while I was in grad school and I was studying documentary film after that. When I started to think of it as more of an art form, and like even myself as an artist, I always thought of myself as just like making political change. And so, yeah, that's just been like, I guess it's like a lot of undoing of like, how you think of yourself and your impact and like what you're even capable of. And so that took a while for me, I think longer than a lot of people. And I think it's like from not having exposure to actual filmmakers and not like speaking to actual filmmakers that I didn't really understand how they're created, even if I'm interacting with the medium constantly. And, I consider myself a cinephile, I watch everything. I still didn't it didn't really click to me until I had to like meet someone and meet people, and had one of my good friends who was, like I said, Farron, who's actually like thinking about herself in that way allows me to now think about myself in that way. And so It was a long
Fair,
journey, huh?
they fair
Fair
and
and
Humes,
Humes, yeah.
filmmaker Fair and Humes. Yeah, I mean, Zeinabu, can you talk a little bit about, because I think deciding to pursue is one thing, and then finding your voice. I think, you know, all of us are fans of your work, and I know I just appreciate any filmmaker when I can turn on their films and just like get a feeling. And I feel like your films have like so much heart and so much beauty, and just well, I know we've been talking about cycles a lot lately. And just, you know, I'm just curious what how you think about your own approach, how you got into the language of cinema, and what spoke to you about the ways you wanted to express yourself.
Wow. First, I wanted to just like give homage to some of the people you guys have already mentioned. This is some really powerful folks that are a part of our tradition who I don't feel like they get as much props as they should, especially Louis Messiah with Scribe Video. And then also, I can't think of Scribe Video without thinking about Tony K. Bombara, who still, you know, she might be gone for a long time, but she's still in so many of our hearts as we keep thinking about how we can do film in service of building community, which is what she was always about, and what she and Louis and you know Mancha and Camille Billups, all these folks who were about trying to talk to folks in our communities and represent our stories and make sure that people knew that this was something that was accessible to us, which is what you all are talking about and expressing. So I think for me, you know, in the early 80s, unfortunately, we're suffering from a place where we didn't see ourselves represented in imagery. In the 70s and 80s, yes, there's the Black exploitation period, but then after that, that comes and goes so quickly that you're like, oh my God, Lincoln is like, you don't know what happened. And so there was such little representation of Black women in the media in the early 80s. It was basically like, in terms of feature films, it was basically Whoopi Goldberg, and that was it. There weren't any other, you know, Black women that were represented, light skin, dark skin, any kind of skin. They weren't really on the scene. So it really was compelling to us that, you know, those of us who were given the ability to have education and go to film school, that we had to go and create images that represented the communities that we came from. And so that was really that was always the impetus, that was always the mission. And how we went about it might have been different ways. I mean, one of the things that I love about your film society is that you all have people doing different kinds of things. But unfortunately, if you look back at like what we did or what we came up through, people kind of got pigeonholed. Like you did narrative films, or you did documentary films, or you did experimental films. There wasn't necessarily that smooth or very tradition that you all are doing. And so that was something that I knew that I wanted to try to play with specifically. So I did do narrative films. I do experimental films. I do documentaries also. So just to like be able to be empowered to realize that it doesn't really matter what genre you're a part of. It's always trying to tell whatever story, or to give the experience, or to give the atmosphere, whatever, of the community that you're trying to represent. And so that's why I think for me that I'm grateful, Yvonne, that you can feel that when you actually see the films that I have been able to make. I'm not the most prolific filmmaker, but I do have films that have lasted for many years, and people still are able to get something from them. So that part of it, I'm like super grateful for.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit because I see that time is, of course, getting away from us.
It would.
I do want to, yeah, I do think it's important for us to get to collectives and what that means for all of us, as you know, we're all working in collectives here. So I don't know who wants to begin. I don't know, Zeinabu, you want to start and ask and answer, like, what does a collective mean for you?
Wow. I was thinking about that since we talked about it a little bit this morning. And I think it can mean many things. You know, when we were a part of the LA Rebellion, it wasn't like we were walking around with T-shirts and hats and stuff to say, you know, we are the LA Rebellion. We were just helping each other do our films or videos, whatever the heck it was that we were trying to do. It wasn't until later that the scholars and the historians came in, the programmers, and said, "Oh, y'all have this like unique aesthetic, and so we'll call you the LA Rebellion." It's coined by a film historian, Clyde Taylor, and his wife, who doesn't get credit enough, Marty Taylor. So I think that for me, it's just if there's this ethos of people who really want to go about the same thing. Yes, it can be united in organization or a specific group, but sometimes it's really just about a group of people coming together for whatever purposes. I want to point out to you all, like the like even before the LA Rebellion folks, we had people who were doing collective things through things called the newsreel experience. So California Newsreel, Third World Newsreel. You know, there were all these newsreel groups that are in different parts of the country. And that's how, you know, I mean, they basically are the beginnings of, you know, YouTube or social media, if you think about it enough, is that they saw that their communities were not being represented on the screen. So they took the cameras into their own hands and tried to produce that media, and then would send around these like 16 millimeter reels so that people could actually see these things. And it, you know, it could be anywhere. It could be in a church basement. It could be in the park with a sheet, you know, strung across with, you know, a clothesline and a sheet on it or something like that. So it could mean many things. I think that the main thing is all of us trying to come together for some kind of like commonality in terms of what we want for representation and what we want in terms of telling stories of our own communities. That's what a collective can and can't be. I mean, we would do things like distribution collectives. Everybody would gather their films, like the Black Filmmaker Foundation in New York in the late 70s, early 80s was collecting all our films and making sure that people were watching them, you know, or doing things. And then Visual Communications, which is a group of Asian American filmmakers out of UCLA, they would do basically what Scribe is. You know, they started a center in LA where people from the community come and learn how to make films, or a group could come and ask some group of filmmakers that were already there, hey, can you make a film about this particular subject?
Oh, wow.
Or this particular issue, or we having problems with the landlord, you know, whoever, you know, we can't get services from the city, or, you know, what have you. So people would value what media could do or could help them do. And that's how the ethos, I think, of collective can be used. It can be formal and it can be informal, is what I think I'm trying to really get across to you guys.
Oh, that's amazing. And that's so good to hear. I think for us, I think that we have kind of a reverse story. in terms of like, yeah, how our collective was formed, and that, you know, we're people who were making films individually, and then, you know, we kind of saw each other, and we decided, you know, like the collective, none of us founded the collective. It was actually founded by Kumi James and Jatavia Gary and Nuatoma Badomo and another woman, Nev Naji. And so, you know, they formed the collective, and then they went off and like recruited all of us to come in and continue. And so we're trying to get to that, though. We're trying to get to the point where it's funny, like just working on each other's films and like ensuring that each other continue making work. Because the whole idea was to protect ourselves from what we see as an industry that is just, you know, pressuring us to be something else because of who we are, you know, because we are political, because we all have political point of views, and we all like wanted to get into filmmaking, I think, for some political reasons. And so, yeah, but it's really good to hear you all I don't know, to hear like how community oriented it was from the beginning. And I think that's something that we really want to move towards more so.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's one kind of growing, you know, with like, it can be so many things. It can mean so many things. And I think, you know, we've talked about at its founding, it was a space of solace, a space of healing, a space of venting, and a space of showcasing work together. And I know, just for myself, the most recent member of the group, in addition to yearning to wanting all of that, you know, just in conversations, we also just begin to really think about the building aspect of it, and what can we create a system of working for each other that is nurturing. It's like imagining the possibilities. It's, you know, why should we normalize going out into you know, a hostile environment, trying to explain like basicness of our humanity to people who, you know, have sometimes traditionally pathological ideas about who we are. And, you know, it's like, what if we create a model, and really just for ourselves to know that it can be done, where we can come to each other with a project that we can build from the ground up. And we can also, in this day and age with, you know, technology, we can also build a community, build an audience to share it with. You know, in all the ways that's what kind of that's one of the reasons why I loved your film so much, was because there were all these models that were presented of groups that were doing that in the late 60s, early 70s. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, and for me, more and more, you know, it's an interesting time. It's a very difficult time. And, you know, people are asking us questions, and, you know, what world do you all imagine? And
Yeah.
what are you all imagining?
Yeah, I love what you said, Yvonne. Like, after we were talking about Spirits of Rebellion earlier, and Yvonne had said, like, it just shows you how the medium is just like made almost for this collectivity. It's made to be community produced. Like it can be used in that way. It's not traditionally used in that way, but I think that's definitely what LA Rebellion and other collectives have done. And so, and it seems like now it should be easier for us to achieve that because the technology is so much cheaper. And then people are just, in terms of like kids are making things now, like they're contributing to media now on their own, through TikTok or, you know, Vine, or it used to be, or Instagram, what have you. So it seems there's it's less mystified than it even was when I was deciding to become a filmmaker. I just think that we just have to, but I think, I don't know, I don't want to be too critical as to where we are right now in Black cinema, but I do think we need to rethink, like, and maybe consciously move towards, more community-based models, and be more creative as to how we integrate, people who wouldn't traditionally be in this field, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering if you could share with us because that's what I mean. There are so many assets for sure, and there are also many challenges. to working in what we call a collective way. I was wondering, Zainabu, you shared with us earlier just some stories of your experiences in LA working collectively with some filmmakers that I'm sure our audience knows very well.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So what's not in the film is like some of the stories of like, going to UCLA Film School was a difficult experience. By the time I got to UCLA, there were no Black people there, or there were very few that were there. So um, really, the folks from the LA Rebellion had already been through the experience. They were my mentor. So I was lucky enough to live next door to Julie Dash. Alile Sharon Larkin lived across the street. Barbara McCullough was down the block. Charles Burnett was not far. So really, um, and then the brother who ran the equipment room at UCLA lived downstairs in our apartment building. So it was like we were all in the same physical space at the time. So discussions and, arguments or, collaborations were happening with each other while we're on campus, but they would also continue when we got home because we were still together to some degree, or we knew that we could rely on each other. And then the one thing that I wanted to also make sure that I emphasized with you all was that we did not divorce our families away from the process. So, Barbara had kids, so the kids would be on the set. Charlie had kids, the kids would be on the set. When I'm editing later on, my oldest daughter is underneath the edit room table while, we're working on pulling the shots, etc. She's in her coloring book, whatever. So kids and families were not divorced from the process, and from the process of making film and exhibiting film. So they were always a part of that, and that helped to sustain us and to enrich us. And it was hard because sometimes, you like, okay, well, am my mom right at this moment? Am I, filmmaker at this moment? Or, how am I navigating these things? And sometimes things take more precedence than others. Sometimes the kids or the partner, is more important, and sometimes the films are more important. And you just have to kind of like, go with that ebb and flow of however it happens. And the main thing is you just can't beat yourself up for stuff. I'm my own worst enemy. For the most part. And you just have to like figure out ways where you are as kind to yourself and you do self-care as much as possible so you can get through all that you have to manage or undergo. So it's important to have as many like-minded people around you and supporting you as possible. And they don't have to be filmmakers necessarily. It's great if you have filmmakers or media people to talk to, but they don't have to be the only ones that you talk to. People can support you in so many different kinds of ways. Nobody I ever had any money, but my husband's mother would cook a whole bunch of lasagna or fried chicken, and that'd be the catering for the crew. And so there's so many different ways that people can participate in the making of media. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that it is something that you can't really do by yourself. And I think that's part of what the problem is that the Hollywood studio system tends to glorify or put up before us like singular people, right? It's just like one person, the great so and so, You know, and it's like, well, wait a minute. When you see those credits roll, how many hundreds of people's names is behind the great so and so? So, you know, I mean, that's what I kind of really appreciated about Ryan Coogler with Black Panther, was that he brought so many other people with him into the, you know, studio situation, and they were women. You know, so it was Rachel Morrison was cinematographer, Hannah Beekler was production designer, Ruth Carter was costume design. One of his two editors is also a woman. So there were ways that he kind of showed Hollywood it ain't just me, it's all these other people and all these other fabulous talents that people are bringing. And if you trust these collaborators, then you can have them buy into whatever vision it is that you're trying to get across. It doesn't always have to be like, you know, the great ha ha ha, me all the time. It can also be about bringing a whole group of people up with us and continuing to work with that same group of people, which is what he, you know, he does. He's still working with the same folks that he did, you know. Unfortunately, sorry, he went to USC. He didn't go to UCLA, but you know,
Unfortunately.
you know, but I swear to God, somewhere he must have drank some water fountain at UCLA, because he got some of whatever we had, you know, when he started making his films. So you can't tell me that, you know, Ryan Coogler is not the godson of Charles Burnett, because I believe that he is. Killer of Sheep to Fruitville Station is a pretty easy jump to make between these lines of filmmakers. So I think that that is something that, you know, we need to know about each other and each other's work and support each other as much as possible. I don't say you have to agree with everything, and then the way you might want to make a film might be completely different than the way I want to make a film. But I think we're at a place now that where we weren't back in the you know, in the 80s or even the 90s, where we have people on different fronts, and so we can support each other in different ways. We still got, you know, white supremacy to tear us down, but we don't need to. We ourselves don't need to tear each other down. We already have these other, you know, structural systems that keep us, you know, censored or keep us encumbered and not able to do all that we want to do. But I think there's ways that clearly you all have found with your work to play with form, to open up people's eyes about what Black film aesthetics could or can't be, and how far you can push an audience to go with you in a story that, you know, maybe you've seen parts of the story before, but maybe you haven't. But how can we push those things a little bit further? That's what I'm excited about seeing you all take on and do. And I hope that you all continue to do that in the future, because we need you. We need you desperately. So, you know, I feel like you might have some challenges, but you all are good people and we're in good hands.
I say.
That's nice to hear. Yeah. I don't know. It always feels so hard though. So we all have we have our moments where it just feels like maybe it's too hard, it's too much.
No, it was just something that you know, when you talk about it, it always resonates me in this particular way. I'm just thinking about even how the web series I directed and co-wrote 195 Lewis, how that was created, right? So like you have these two creators of the show who have this amazing idea of, you know, queer Black women in Brooklyn, you know, navigating polyamory, right? But then they had, you know, one is a poet, the other is a writer and scholar. They had never written a screenplay before, but they were like, we can do this, right? Like, we're just gonna do this. And how even that really extended to, you know, production of that web series was majority Black, queer, women and non-binary folk who had little to no film experience, film or TV experience. But again, they had certain talents. And I think that also goes back to what you were saying before in regards to, you know, it's not just having a film community, but it's also being attached to all of these different kinds of communities. And it just makes me think about, like, I am in community with folks that are about liberation and whatever paths that they choose to take. You know, whether it's about farmers talking about, you know, racial justice within the farming industry, or community organizers, or folks who work within academia, and then, you know, of course, like filmmakers and other artists and such, and educators, right? So it's like, I feel like I have if I have feet, several feet, like all of those, the foots would be in all of those points of community, and leveraging, because at the end of the day, it's about skills, knowledge, experience, and how can you leverage that to bring something to screen. And so I think 195 was such an amazing example of that, because you had folks who, you know, let's say that they were like event planners, or they just like are freelancers, and freelancers, we can just do whatever, like we just make it happen, right? So if they may not necessarily have produced before, but they're amazing project managers and program managers and community organizers, they know how to, you know, to put something together. I love talking about the experience of working with my music supervisor, Ryan Holmes, who is also a collective member and a co-founder of a collective, Brooklyn Boyhood. And so, you know, when it was time for, we were in post, I was like, I really need somebody who, you know, who knows music well, and knows music well that I feel like genuinely, authentically reflects the community that we're seeing on screen. And so I remember them saying, like, hey, I've never done this before, but I think I would be really good at it. Like, let me just go with it. And they just came along. And I love, and I mean, the soundtrack 195 is probably one of my favorite aspects to it. Like, I've seen the episodes over and over again, and I'm like, still love the music so much. But again, it's being able to, I'm glad that I was able to, like, recognize their strength, you know, like, they love music. They have access to, like, local and independent musicians that, you know, that wanted to contribute to this project. And also, you know, other folks that were able to come onto the project that, again, had little to no, you know, film and TV experience, but who knew how important the project was. And that was just like, how do we make this work, you know? Exactly. That's something that, you know, it's that essence that I want to be able to continue to provide and participate in. But then, of course, it always comes down to, like, sustainability, like, you know, the challenges of just, at the end of the day, resources. You know, everybody has bills to pay and rent to pay and all the things. So it's always trying to find that balance. But I think at the end of the day, just really leveraging. And then, because I also have, like, this policy background, and how, like, I keep thinking about this, like, asset theory, this asset deficit theory, that, you know, traditionally you come into a community, or, you know, basically some white supremacist folks coming into a community and seeing what is lacking, rather than what is already there. What are the resources that are already there, and how do we leverage and scale up in order to move the solutions forward, to move an image forward. And so I think that definitely grounded the ethic of 195, and really what we're trying to do here with the collective.
Yeah. And I have a question. I'm trying to figure out how to connect the dots, because I do think, you know, it's very much related to what is in your film, especially around money, around distribution, around, you know, access to certain platforms that historically are not for us, and how that then complicates the intention and complicates the message, and just complicates. And, you know, I think right now we're at a moment of reckoning, and, you know, many of us, of course, a lot of us, these are the concerns that permeate our work regardless of what's happening. But, publicly we're at a moment of reckoning, and how you contextualized in your film the LA Rebellion, artists coming together at a moment of reckoning out of the Watts riots. And so I listened very closely anytime someone was speaking about their ideas around the distribution of their film. And like there were a few people that I think Larry Clark mentioned one of his films, how he said this film was never meant to be to get sold to a distributor. It was meant to be shared, like word of mouth or hand to hand in the community. And and also thinking about the way that Sankofa, the story about how Sankofa found its community and developed its audience. And also I think the filmmaker who founded the Chaos, Lamert Park initiative, just, what are your thoughts around, because then, I mean, and I don't want to assume, but arguably there are more opportunities for distribution now for Black filmmakers, perhaps, than there were then. Thinking about how Haile Gerima said about graduating into a desert, certainly that's a bit different now, but still there seems like could be a compromise there, could be a complication there, if you are kind of spending so much time and effort entering a certain space. That might mean you're neglecting time and resources in another direction that could actually be more beneficial to more people. And that was kind of abstract in general, but hopefully I'm just curious about your thoughts, just how this capitalistic commodification of the work that seems to be so deeply embedded in film, in particular, how you just feel about that and how you've navigated that.
Well, I think that we also have to be more aware of how film is consumed and perceived in other parts of the world, and not just, in Hollywood as the end all be all
Right.
of it. And I think we can gain both inspiration and insight into, how films or how film communities were developed in different parts of the world. Like Cuba obviously would be like one of the shining examples of a cinema that has existed for so long and that supports the ideals and goals of liberation in a really positive way that does not denigrate, women or, people who are it does not necessarily denigrate people who come from different class backgrounds or different religious or ethnic backgrounds. And that's not the only one, but I'm just giving that one as a quick example of longevity, but sustainability, that was able to exist for, so many different years. So I think the sustainability issue is like one of the key things, because yeah, you can make a film now and you can put it on YouTube, but unless you got thousands or hundreds of thousands of hits on it, you ain't making no more money from it. So therefore, you can't rely on that as something to keep going back to. Whereas if you kind of create something like Ben did with Chaos in Lamert Park in LA, he got his own building, he has his own space. And so he can bring different people into that space. And then those people can go on and then, form their own groups or, get into music, get into different types of, environmental awareness or so on and so forth, or fighting gentrification. So there's different kinds of models that I think we need to make sure that we look at. And they might not necessarily always be models that are connected to filmmaking per se. They might be models of how people just operate in terms of community. I'm thinking of people like my good friend and sister filmmaker Portia Cobb. The work that she did with the community media workshop in Milwaukee was to kind of bring everybody to the table in order to express, whatever issues or concerns they had. It was to teach people the power of media, but it wasn't necessarily to make them into filmmakers. And that's okay. We don't want necessarily everybody to be a filmmaker. We want people to be able to have who they are expressed in film. And if you have the skills to kind of make that happen, then you go make that happen as part of your mission. But I think what will keep us more grounded, we might not, if we keep choosing the path that we have right now as filmmakers, we ain't going to be in no mansions. We ain't going to be in, we ain't going to be rolling in dough, and all that kind of stuff. But what we will have is a rich life, and a life that we know that we did good for others. And that was the ethos of what my parents gave to me, was that it was like, okay, you can do whatever you want to do in life. I really want you to be a doctor, lawyer, teacher. Okay. But, hey, you became a filmmaker. Well, and then you did become a teacher. So it's okay. I'm okay with them. But it's like, make sure you do something for somebody else so that they have a better way, or that they have another means of doing good for others. So that's where I think we have to just kind of take some deep breaths and really realize that this is a long haul, and it's not going to get satisfied with just us here, or it's something that's going to need to go on and on and on and on and on. And we just pass the torch to the next person or the next group or whoever that might be, and then just know that we made a difference somehow.
Well, that is a perfect place to, I guess, begin to take questions.
Okay.
Nene, are you out there? How do we ask for questions? Oh, I think in the comments.
We just asked. Yeah, so Sarah Calder, our only question so far is what's a must-watch movie for all speakers from a teaching and art perspective? One movie is, at least for me, is very hard to answer, but I'll just say that Spirits of Rebellion is on our site, streaming right now. And if you're interested in collectivity, you're interested in Black cinema, it's a must-see right now. And to continue to watch all the films that are in the conference, because, it took us a really long time to put this together. And it's been through, we've thought a lot about this as to which filmmakers that we wanted to highlight this year. And so I would encourage Spirits of Rebellion from an educational and also from an artistic standpoint, but all the films in the conference, just to see what's happening right now with Black women's cinema. What about the rest of y'all?
That's a good answer.
I would put in a plug for people to watch Battle of Algiers, if you can get your hands on it.
That's a good one.
I wanted to bring that one up because it is one that talks about, overtaking colonialism in whatever way, shape, or form you can. And the assistant director on that film is a Black woman that we should all know, Sarah Maldoror,
right,
who is from Guadeloupe, but who married an Angolan. And that film was one of the first ones that she worked on. She went on to make her own film, Sambizanga, which unfortunately exists as a bad copy that you can watch on YouTube, but at least you can see it. And you can see this early work of a Black woman filmmaker who was totally committed to using the power of cinema to make statements about racism, colonialism, class issues, so on and so forth. And I wanted to just point out to you, because we lost Sarah recently to COVID, that there are many makers who have worked in this tradition who you can go back to. Sometimes it's hard to find those films, but know that those films are out there, and it might take a little bit of effort to find them. They ain't gonna be on Netflix, but you can get to them in some kind of way.
And to that point, Zeinabu, I know you before you mentioned a couple other filmmakers that you wanted to shout out, women that maybe weren't in the part of the LA Rebellion, but some other names that you wanted us to be aware of.
Well, I just want to make sure people know about Kathleen Collins, filmmaker, because Kathleen Collins taught Julie Dash. I want to make sure that people were aware of Safi Faye from Senegal, who does ethnographic documentary work, but also worked in features. I want to make sure people were aware of some of the women in the rebellion who have passed on, specifically Carol Parrott Blue, who was a documentarian, and Melvana Ballinger, who was also a narrative filmmaker, did one of the early films about Black hair. But some of the works are available through UCLA on the UCLA Film and Television Archive website, so you can see some of those works there as well. And you all already mentioned the ever wonderful, hilarious Camille Billups, who also, Camille was really important in preserving history of Black arts with her and her husband, with the Hatch Billups collection that's now at Emory in Atlanta. So we come from a tradition of women who wanted to manage their own imagery. They may have come out of places like writing or other art forms, but it's important to also include them into who are thinking of, like Zora Neale Hurston made films, Madam C.J. Walker made films. So they did different things, but they also included this medium. So it's a blessing to us that we have them as our background, and it was a part of our background. And like, to go back to what Chanel said earlier, it's like super important to bring other people who have other skills into this. So like these musicians and other artists, I mean, that's the beauty of our art form, is that our art form can actually include other art forms. So you can have dance, you can have music, you can have visual art, you can have performance in a film. So we're lucky. We're cursed because it costs so damn much money, but we're lucky in that we can also include these other forms of expression.
That's so true. That's so true. Should we take another question? Are there any other questions out there?
Don't see anyone commenting with more questions.
Any way we can spell their names in the comments. We're going to record this and we're going to share it. We've recorded this and we're going to share it, so you'll be able to listen back if you have to spell it.
Oh, I see Terry is doing the work.
Thank
you, Terry. Shout out to Terry for linking and spelling the names.
Was it Terry Francis?
Yes.
Yeah, who else, right? Love you, Terry. Thank you.
Someone, Nicholas Turner.
Oh, okay.
That's a question.
Yes.
What should I read it? What are the barriers you face in terms of funding, crowdsourcing, donors, etc.? grants, crowdsourcing, doing how much does fundraising consume your labor? Does working as a collective help fundraising efforts? I guess that's a question we could answer.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
take this.
I think that for us, like, I mean, we were discussing earlier about like the work that it takes just to build an alternative space. And yeah, I think there was a quote in Ella Rebellion, someone saying that too, like the work that it takes to actually build the space is sometimes takes away from the actual art making work, right? And so that's why this is a great question. Like, honestly, in the last year, I'm being transparent, it's been a lot of admin and fundraising work that I wouldn't say like it's prevented me from doing my own work, but it's definitely like a factor and like, because I also teach and I also edit. And so, yeah, I just sometimes feel exhausted from having to work for others, I guess, or to service others. And which is great. I mean, it's what I want to do in my life. Honestly, it is a part of my own personal work is I want to like continue building spaces and to, yeah, passing the medium on, because I do think that that's our duty as filmmakers. But I'm trying to find, at least for me personally, I'm trying to find a balance as to how to like continue to do Negress work and also also to create work that other people can consume in the more traditional way. But yeah, so in terms of the barriers, I mean, it's so exhausting. I mean, I don't know how else it's just exhausting looking for grants and writing the proposals and doing the follow-up emails and gathering the materials. It's just endless admin work that like nonprofits hire one person or a whole team to do full time. And we're like on top of that, trying to like, you know, pay rent and all that. What about you all? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that working as a collective, sharing the efforts is helpful for sure. So I appreciate when we can come together. Okay, yo, we got this grant. You do this part, you do that part, I'll do this part. Because you know we've done it as individuals, and it's a load. It's a load when you do have to carry it solely by yourself. So yeah, I have found that, and I think also it's helped in terms of just the way that I want to interface with a lot of these funding institutions. I feel stronger, you know, in communicating with them, because we can present such a strong understanding of who we are, about our processes. I think that just having a collective makes people, you know, take notice on a certain that these are artists with a certain set of principles, a certain set of values. So I feel like it strengthens and empowers us with these institutions. Yeah, that's one thing that I enjoy, working in community with you all and doing that type of work.
And it also just, you know, it's just the having other perspectives, you know, because sometimes when you're working on a grant or when you're working on your own project, you're so close to it. And so sometimes you can just overlook a lot of certain things. So I think having other eyes on your work, on your practice, like I can be able to let Yvonne and Stephanie and other folks and, you know, the collective know, like, no, you're absolutely amazing at this, and don't forget that, and you know, remember that you know, it's basically just having that other perspective. I think really helps strengthen, you know, any and all of our applications. So not just from like a creative perspective, but also just simply from an application perspective and pitching, and just like how do you present yourself to a potential funder? How do you like hype yourself up to get someone else excited, a potential funder or a potential supporter excited about, you know, about this project. I think that was one of the pieces of advice, like when going to like markets or any of these labs, and when you're talking about pitching, it's actually really nice to go in a team, because then your strategy is like, you basically get to brag for the other person, right? So I think, it's because it feels weird to be like, well, let me tell you, these are all the awards and all the things that I got, and this is why you should give me money. It actually feels, I don't know, it's just a thing where it's, if I'm sitting there with somebody else on the team, I could be like, well, and this is why I want to work with her, because she's so amazing, and she did this and she accomplished that. Like Stephanie's film, 7th grade has like 3 million views at this point. I don't even know how many, at this point. So it's like, but being in how many?
3.5.
3.5. There you go. 3.5 million views on YouTube.
7.
And so
I'm joking. Go ahead.
3.7 million views. But again, I think that also puts us at an advantage when we're able to simply talk about the other person, and not even in a disingenuous way, like in a very heartfelt, genuine way. I think that the other thing about being a collective, we are all fans of each other. So at least for me, I always get really excited about talking about the people that I work with, So yeah, I don't even want to speak to the barriers, because I'm just like, we know what those barriers are, but I'm very.
I'll just say interesting, even though I talked about the barriers a lot, but I'll say interestingly that I think that the work that we did, like with the conference, was a big like fundraising push, and it's just work that we genuinely wanted to do. And I guess that's how it works, even with like when you're creating your own films, like when something that you're genuinely passionate about, it just somehow resonates more. And so I think that's what we're trying to do with the collective, is like work on projects that we genuinely love, and so the conference is that, and it's amazing the support that we've been able to get in just convening people, and that really has been our main fundraising pool, I think, right now, which is awesome. Any other questions? I don't think. Thank you, Jackson, too, for posting links. Shout out to Jackson. Big supporter as well. Well, I think we can just.
Yeah, if there are any other questions, we can close the conversation and just give so much thanks to you, Zeinabu, for being with us and being, part of this conversation. And also just joining the conference, like, we were talking before, for those who are joining us, before the conference. I guess this is our second conference, but before every conference, we also like to convene all of the filmmakers for the conference, really just to connect, and also just, frame the conversation for how we're entering the conference, but also wanting to be able to just kind of recap and close. And so we would love for you to join us in that conversation. And we just really admire
There's
you.
one.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, there's another question.
Maybe last one, and then we can continue.
Okay,
what are you doing to keep your spirits up in these chaotic times?
Other than film.
I mean, Ivana, we were just talking about this earlier, actually. Sorry. What?
Oh, no, I was saying if they with that one, or.
I'm sorry, you broke up. I didn't hear you.
What did you want to answer the question first?
Oh, what am I doing to keep my sanity right now? I'm feeding hummingbirds, I'm gardening, and I'm swimming whenever I can get a reservation at the pool.
Yeah.
We have to reserve here in California, at least in San Diego. You can't just go to the pool, you got to reserve. But I've been fascinated by hummingbirds. They are amazing creatures, and I've enjoyed feeding them. I'm enjoying working, getting my hands in the earth. Getting bit by a bunch of mosquitoes and all kinds of bugs that I never imagined possible, but growing your own food or growing stuff that you can eat is really fulfilling. I know there's a lot of people that are doing that right now, and I could see why.
Yeah.
You just feel so connected to stuff when you do that. So I'm grateful that I'm able to have a space where I can do that.
Yeah. Similarly, I grew some spinach. I grew 2 things, spinach and arugula. And I one thing I've been doing, for a project, I've been revisiting the text, the book, The Color Purple, and so I've been listening to it. And there's an Alice Walker read version, and it's been so soothing. So like, days when I just can't look at a screen anymore, just like lay down, press play on Alice reading Purple has been really wonderful.
So now, are you doing anything?
Honestly, I've just been spending so much time with my family. It's been really, really nice. I mean, my family, we're all in the Bronx, or most of us are in the Bronx, and now we've kind of ventured upstate. But I had been living in Brooklyn for like 10 years, and it's like Brooklyn is in New York, But listen, to those who are outside of New York, Brooklyn and the Bronx are very far away from each other. So, door to door on the train, it's like an hour and a half. I could be in Philadelphia by then. So it's just a lot. So yeah, it's just, since I have moved back to the Bronx, it's been really nourishing to be close with family and quarantined with family. I know family can bring up a lot of stuff in its own right, but I think at the forefront, I'm just grateful, and I get to spend time with my niece and nephew, and then I don't know. I feel like I've just been absorbing. See, I'm the opposite of Yvonne. Like, I don't mind being in front of a screen all day. Like, I've been taking as many like webinars and online classes, and I've just been trying to absorb as much information as possible. I just love learning. I mean, I'm sure all of that love learning, but I mean, like, the on-screen version of that hasn't bothered me so much. So yeah, family and just like absorbing as much news as possible. That's not the news. I don't do that.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've been with family a lot as well. I was teaching too this summer. We like came up with a socially distanced way. Like, we would meet in the park and like hand out cameras and to teenagers, and that was really great because they came ready to talk about everything, that's been happening, and so it's always really like, I don't know, I guess it makes you feel hopeful when you see the young people just like they're getting such a great political education just from everything that's been happening. And they made films in response to it. And so that was cool. And it was therapeutic, I think, for me. I just got married. And so I've been in this apartment under lockdown with my husband. And so, yeah, that's been cool. And I have a dog, and we got a dog. So that's been really cool. So it's weird. I feel like things are personally are really beautiful right now in my life, but then the world is just like, yeah, which makes it, I don't know. It's, I guess, a mind fuck, but I don't know. I'm still hopeful as to like what's happening. That we're like, from this, like, things will continue to create, and I don't know.
Well, thank you all for tuning in with us. Please check out Spirits of Rebellion. It will be up until next Wednesday. And please tune in for every Thursday and Friday, 6:30 to 7:30, a conversation featuring the filmmakers whose films are in the festival, in the conference.
Tomorrow is
Numa.
Yep. Culture and Power with Numa Perrier and Tassan Lopez Cassell.
Yeah.
Just talking about the films of Numa. So tomorrow, Friday, September 11th, 6:30 Eastern Time. If you can join us, please do. It's going to be a great time.
Yes. All right.
So thank you, everyone.
Thank
you
you.
all.
Thank you so much, Zeinabu. Thank you for everything.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you all for being here and providing this for everybody to have something to come to, positive and nourishing. I look forward to joining you all for many more of these events.
Yes, we look forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Good night, everyone. Take care. Bye.
May take us out, or how do we?
And leave studio.